Southwest Fire Academy was established in 2015 as a response to the recognized need for quality, safe, and affordable fire and rescue training in Ontario. This is not your average fire college. SFA has high standards for their students, and it is their mission to teach and produce qualified, ambitious firefighters who are prepared to work hard to serve their communities. This is not a diploma mill. This is where you can learn strategic, aggressive firefighting from passionate, intelligent instructors who never forget why they were made to do this job. SFA is an accredited private career college that is regulated by the Ministry of Training, colleges, and universities, with a memorandum of understanding with the Office of the Fire Marshal. This means that SFA is an approved training provider with the OFM, and the programs are recognized in Ontario. Check out their pre-service and expanding selection of course offerings at southwestfireacademy.ca. Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 91 of Multiple Calls. I'm Scott Hewlett. Having a voice, whether it's public or private, is about the audience and being transparent about your relationship with the information you're sharing. Before you speak at the table, it's important to set it. Is it something you've learned or simply been exposed to? What problem are you trying to solve? Are you looking for discussion and collaboration? Why do you think it's valuable? Being honest with your intent will give you the courage to speak and bring forth encouragement from good people. Socrates said, "If what you want to say is neither true, nor good, or kind, nor useful or necessary, please don't say anything at all, unless you're breaking balls." Here's Mickey Farrell. Kick off with where you grew up and tell me a bit about your family, so why don't you start us there?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, about an hour out of New York City. I guess a vacation resort town at one point, and that's kind of how I ended up there because my grandfather was a fireman and he built a house on the lake up here, and that's kind of how we all ended up over here.
What'd your parents do growing up?
My dad owned a cabin shop in a small town here. With that, he also owned a plumbing supply warehouse where I worked in as a kid for many years. That was pretty cool because I got to meet a lot of different people in town. You kind of grow up with the town's people at that point, so that was kind of a nice twist on growing up in town where you like everyone knew you and you get to know everybody.
Brothers and sisters?
No, I'm an only child. And my mom, she stayed home. She pretty much was the homemaker, did a phenomenal job. I have some great memories growing up in a small town with my mom while my dad worked, obviously. But having the town or the store within the town, it was kind of like a family business that we were all a part of.
And how was school for you?
Wasn't a fan of school. It's not that I hated school so much, but I wasn't very good at it. And I had a hard time with test taking. I always have had a hard time with test taking. I found it very frustrating in school. I had friends and I was pretty much friendly with everyone in school. So that made it somewhat easy to go to school. But the academic side made me really, really hated school to the point where getting into my future, I always wanted to be a New York City fireman. And at that point, you needed a GED. So I was like, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm dropping out. I'm moving to the city. Thank God I stayed because very quickly it went from a GED to you needed college credits to get on the job. And my test was the first test that they actually did that. So thank God my parents were like, you're not dropping out of high school. But that's how much I probably didn't enjoy school was enough where I didn't want to go back.
And what about sports and hobbies as a kid?
I played sports just like every other kid. Little league, basketball. I still love basketball. I still love baseball as well. My son plays basketball. We just came from basketball camp this morning. It's just fun to watch him. He's going to the same camp I went to as a kid and seeing him in that element. So that was kind of fun. But I found organized sports wasn't necessarily always for me as much as I enjoyed it, the team aspect. And I think that's very important with firefighting today is where we should be recruiting from team aspect. But I found my outlet more through creativity, through music and skateboarding, believe it or not. Music took me to many places. It took me all over the country. And kind of where I am today with what I'm doing with social media, it kind of reflects on that time of my life of that creativity of being on tour with the band and meeting people and traveling. So that was my early take on sports, but the creative angle was being able to express yourself through that element.
How'd you get started in playing music?
It's just one of those things that, we always had music in the household in the morning. My dad was always playing music. We were just a music family. We go for long car drives, listen to music, and that's just where guess I found a love for music that way. I picked up an old drum set one day, and the rest was history. And with that, like, we would practice. Usually you practice at the drummer's parents' house as a kid, right? That's kind of how it goes. So our house became like the melting pot of all the kids in school, which was kind of cool because we would get done with school and people would come over and we'd hang in the basement and like just listen to us play. So we had all walks of life, from the jocks to the freaks to the goth, everyone in between. It was all kind of a melting pot. My parents' home kind of became like the after school stop for everyone to go. And to this day, people still talk about how my parents are, oh, your parents were so cool. We have that time in the basement. And I'll never forget those times. And so it was really special growing up in a small town with that element. But having that music kind of like connect everyone of all walks of life, I think that was so important. It's probably why to this day, like, music is still a big part of my life, is just it kind of just connects everybody.
Give me the arc of the bands. I'm sure many musicians, there's bands that come and go and groups of friends that come and go. So maybe give me a rundown on how that went for you.
There was one kid in town, this guy Ed, I'll never forget. He had a guitar. My buddy Rich had a guitar, and we weren't really that good of friends, but we were like the younger kids who had these instruments and we didn't really know how to play them. So we learned together, and that was kind of our first band. And we wrote a couple songs, and they actually weren't bad looking back to what we were doing. Then getting into high school, a senior, I was a sophomore at the time, I remember, he came up into the hallway and he gave me just a note and he put it in my chest and walked away. And I unfolded the note and it said, "We're looking for a drummer. We heard you're a drummer. Do you want to be in our band?" And the rest was kind of history for my high school band. But that high school band eventually evolved into a band that took us to the next level. And it was the same core of guys from high school that we did that. And I got to experience that with. Fast forward when that kind of fizzled out and ended, because I always had my eyes set on the fire department. Like, that was my dream. So here I am in this music world, like living every kid's dream of being not a rock star, but like I'm traveling the country playing music every night. So in the sense of what a rock star is, like, I felt like one. But my eyes were always set on the fire service. Like, the FDNY was my ultimate passion, my ultimate goal in life. And people couldn't understand that. So when I had to make an ultimate decision to pursue music as my future, like as a career path, I chose the FDNY because it kind of came at the same time where it was like, okay, now we have to make a big decision. So I chose, obviously, the fire department. That said, though, I never stopped with the music. We still kept playing, but eventually that fizzled out into, it became more of a hobby where I kind of had a rebirth back into music at one point. And we just had like a local band and then like a bar band, but it became again like that whole high school element of all the friends that are now graduated from college. They're all back in town. They're all coming up for the summer because, again, it's somewhat of a resort town. So we had that atmosphere, and it became like a really fun few years until, unfortunately, the singer and my best friend, he had passed away, and the band just stopped. And I never really picked up music since then. There's one point in my life where I kind of revisited it, but I was studying for lieutenant at the time, and it was just too much. And for anyone who understands our job as far as the New York City Fire Department, when you study for a promotion, it's like years and years and years and hours of studying. So I ultimately had to make a decision again between music and fire, and I chose fire.
What style of music were you listening to back then and playing?
Well, I listened to everything. I grew up as like a hip hop type guy, and obviously if you listen to any of my social media, a lot of it's hip hop based, but anything from punk rock to that emo core, like that post core during that like late 90s, like not so much of what emo is today, but like Sunny Day Real Estate is one of my favorite bands of all time and still is. I actually got to see them in New York City just a few months ago on the reunion tour, the same place I saw them in 1994. So that was pretty cool. It was the same room, just a lot of years later. Anything from like Fugazi to, I really can't pinpoint a band, but as far as the types of music, anything from soul, hip hop, punk rock, rock and roll, jazz. I love jazz. Jazz drumming is probably the best drumming because it's the most creative drumming. But yeah, man, I guess just I just love music, all forms of music.
Do you have a favorite drummer or a list of a few favorite drummers?
I guess William Goldsmith, he was the drummer of Sunny Day Real Estate. He's back into it again. He took some time off from playing music, but he's probably that style of music I really enjoy. I can't really pinpoint a certain drummer. I think it's just, it kind of goes through whatever emotion I'm feeling for in that moment and where I kind of identify with that drummer. Lots of different styles. You don't steal a style, but you focus on a style of like rudiments and understanding of like what music is to someone, and you can kind of take a little bit from each. Even music really parallels the fireground a lot too, because throughout your career, you pick and choose of who you kind of want to like mold, like those mentors from afar at a fire, and having that opportunity to be at those fires with these people, and you watch from these guys from afar, and then you kind of pick up little pieces and bits from each of these guys that you carry on through your career. Same with playing music. Like I would listen to all different types of music and kind of form your own style. So I think that firefighting rarely it's a very creative career path if you look at the creativity within it. But that's very important to do that. And we can't lose sight that when we go to a fire, there is a tempo and a rhythm to everything happening so beautifully. And I don't like the word organized chaos, and people use that for the fireground. But I think when you're in the moment of that actual flow or the rhythm of it, there's no better feeling. It's almost a moment of Zen.
What was the first exposure to the fire service? You said it was always a long-term goal, but when did it come onto your radar?
So I'm a third generation firefighter. My grandfather was a fireman in a city right outside New York City, a city called Hoboken. Small little city, 1 square mile. Back when he was a firefighter there, it was going through a different time. It changed. It was a lot of work. They were burning buildings down, a lot of arson, a lot of death. Today, it's one of the most probably wealthiest cities around New York City, right outside it. And it's literally right across the Hudson River. My uncle was an Irvington fireman. My dad was a volunteer fireman here in town where we grew up. So it was always a part of my life. I can't think of a time in my life where I wasn't a part of my life. So I guess just growing up at the volunteer firehouse, or even just going to the Union Hall with my grandfather, and just memories of just being around firemen, not necessarily just family, but always around the firehouse or firemen. It became what I knew. And that's just all I ever wanted to be, because that's all I honestly ever knew.
What was the process for you for getting on then?
So you have to live in the 5 boroughs to get 5 points at that time. And I wanted the job so badly that I wasn't going to play games. You know, a lot of people go out, they'll get a fake address and like play the game, right? And I said, I want this job so badly. And I had the flexibility of being on tour with my band, working in the family business. So I wasn't really committed to anything. I didn't go away to college. So it was like, okay, I'm out of here. And I packed up, moved to New York City, and the rest was kind of history. But like I moved into a small apartment in Queens, and I think I was 18 years old, maybe. It was like right after high school, just boom, right to the city, get that address, establish myself, establish my life. And that's what I did. The process, it's very hard because there's so many factors that go into getting on that job. So many people take it. I think the test I took had like 80,000 people. It's kind of a heartbreak. So I feel like if you want to be a doctor, like you can commit yourself to go to med school. And if you truly, truly commit yourself, you'll eventually become a doctor. With the fire department and the fire service in general, you can do all the right things and it still comes down to a little bit of luck at the end. So that process was very, very stressful. But one of those things where it was just keep your head down, chin up, eyeing the prize, and I just kept moving forward. And that was the only department I focused on, was in New York City. A lot of people in the Northeast, they'll take multiple tests for multiple cities to broaden their possibilities of getting on that job, where I said, you know what, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. This is all I ever wanted. I'm going to do it. And looking back, sometimes I'm like, I can't believe we actually pulled this off. Like to this day, I'll look down at my patch, like at work, I'm thinking, I pulled this off. I can't believe it. All these years later. But so it was an emotional roller coaster of getting on this job. And now we have the mentor program, which is great. I wish we had it back when I was coming on. So I'm a mentor, we have a mentee, and we get assigned these kids that are coming on, and we just kind of guide them, show them the way, show them the right thing to do as far as the process, keep them informed of what we're doing until you get to the academy. And then all through the academy, if they have any questions, they can always reach out to you. So you build these relationships with young kids coming on the job. And I say kids, they're in their 20s, some are even in their 30s at this point, but they're kids in the sense of the firefighting land, of the firefighting world, or the culture of the fire service. So we do a justice for the future of the FDNY by not only molding them to getting there, but having them understand the traditions that are so important that I feel that we're losing ultimately in the fire service.
So that's ahead of them starting the academy.
They get assigned a mentor at a certain point out, and then you communicate. So they're still candidates at that point, and then they move forward to they get on the job. They go through a probationary school. the fire academy and then onto the job. And so you build these relationships before they're a part of the city. So they're working at Applebee's, they're working at Best Buy, wherever they are, you're mentoring to that point of probationary fire school.
In talking to other mentors or just your knowledge of the program in general, do you find, is there a certain percentage or amount that are realizing the job's not for them, and through that mentor program they realize they might want to do a different path?
I don't know anyone firsthand where they admitted into that point where they're like, you know what, this isn't for me. But I'm sure it does weed out people to a certain point. And I say weed out, like you said, they just realize this isn't for me. They took the sanitation test, they took the NYPD test, they took the FDNY test. They're all city kids growing up. They'll take any test to get on civil service. So I think that it's important that I know we're the only job that has this. The PD doesn't have it, EMS doesn't have it, sanitation doesn't have a mentorship program. So I think that it's doing a service for the city by saving it in the long run, by having these kids understand that it's not about you. The fire service is very different than any other profession where it's so much greater than you. And you're a small peg in the hole. And the process of what the FDNY is truly about a team. And by explaining to that early on that this job is so much more than you and what your needs are, then we save so much on the back end of just them having to go home and say to their parents or their wife or kids, I quit the FDNY Fire Academy. And it's also, I think it's a good thing because we're not taking that opportunity away from other people that are on that list that gets left on the list because someone else took it and then decided it wasn't for them too late.
How was your academy experience?
It was an odd one. And the guys in my class were still pretty tight because we came on in a really, really strange time where September 11th happened during our process of going into the academy. So I originally got called for my class. I think there was 99 of us going in. I had to go to headquarters on Monday. I went to headquarters on Monday. I had to go back to headquarters on Tuesday, which ultimately was September 11th. Never made it to headquarters, obviously. And then there was a time of despair where obviously the world was upside down. The job was depleted of everything possible. Any form of understanding of what was going on from the administrative side was completely halted. So they eventually put us back in the academy in October. We went through a very, very, very quick program where the program now is 18 to 23 weeks, depending on when you go through the academy. I think when we went through, we did it in 4.5 weeks. It was just get through, get back to the field, and go to the pile. It was depending where you went. Ultimately, what hook you had determined where you went, just like it is with anything in this job. Anyone can get on the job, but once you get on the job, then it's about kind of who you know. It's just the way it is, especially in the fire service. Certain guys went certain places, certain guys went other places to backfill what had happened. And that's what made our academy class a little bit different than others because we were so rushed through it. But we started every morning with the DI, Joe Higgins. This guy, 111 truck, Marine, heavy hitter. Like this is the guy that when you think of FDNY, this is the guy, right? This is they get the chiseled jaw. Like he was something else. He would go to the pile, look for his brother all night, come back to the academy, and then be there with us in the morning saying, we were down there digging, we found this many guys, we found this person, we found that person. Let's say a prayer. And we'd all say a prayer. And then we say the old hoorah, because he was a Marine. And then we start our day and we would work so hard throughout that day to represent the brothers right across from where we were standing that were no longer with us, because us was saying, holy shit, we're on this job now. This is our job as well. And so that was a strange feeling through the academy. It just had a different vibe. It was just more, we're all in, and it is bigger than us. It all makes sense.
Yeah, I can't imagine any situation where there'd be a deeper perspective and understanding of what it's all about than coming on at that time.
There's the before and there's the after of September 11th. And that's how the job has been divided over the years. There's not too many guys of the before that are still in the trenches. There are, but there's not as many as you would think. It's a very young job today. But then there's the during, which was my class. And there was only 300 and something of us. Went from 99 to 300 because they obviously had to backfill the manpower. But there's a very small margin of us that experienced that moment or what it was to be a part of the New York City Fire Department during that short time.
Is that awareness and perspective waning a bit? Do you see that happening as we get farther from the event?
Absolutely. The farther you get from Manhattan as well, even in the companies, like it was at one point everybody knew somebody on the job, right? Now we're so far removed that we have guys on the job that weren't alive for this, right? So I think it's very important that we maintain the memorials in the firehouses. So anyone that's ever visited a New York City firehouse, especially in Manhattan, there's always a beautiful, beautiful memorial right inside the door. A lot of times they took the old hose towers in the firehouse and made them into a 9/11 memorial. And I think it's very important that we not only maintain them, make sure they're clean and squared away, because sometimes when the family members come by, and it's not too often that family members are coming by anymore, but when they do, sometimes that's all they have or had is that memorial. So I think it's so important that we maintain them, but also it's very important that every tour you work, just stop. You don't have to say a prayer. You don't have to get on your knees. Just stop, take a look, and just reflect for a moment. Where I work now, I'm in a division that covers a huge area of Manhattan. I'm in Harlem side of it. We go all the way down past 42nd Street into like Midtown area. So when you're in that area of the division working, every firehouse lost a substantial amount of men. I make it a point just at least spend 4 or 5 minutes with my coffee, just sitting there on the bumper of the rig maybe, and just looking and reading over the names over and over. And I've worked in some of these firehouses hundreds of times, but if you sit there and just read the names over, to me, it's a way of reflecting that just why we're doing this, why I'm here, and the legacy that these guys have left. And I think that's so important. So yes, I feel like we're losing that the farther we get away from the event, but we have those memorials to bring us back. What people don't realize about September 11th, especially for New York City firemen or just New Yorkers in general, is that it's not one day. It's a lifetime. So every day we relive this, or we're not reliving that moment, but we're living within the moment of September 11th because it's always overshadowing our great city. And good or bad, it's there. We have to focus on the good and how strong and resilient we are as New Yorkers, and as strong as resilient as we are as the FDNY.
Outside of that incredible uniqueness of your first years on the service, how were your rookie years otherwise?
They were good. It's not what I expected. Going back to like saying the hook, right? And like you're in the academy and certain guys go certain places. And all I ever wanted to do was be a ghetto fireman. I just wanted to be fireman in the Bronx, work in the busiest neighborhoods, everything that we've always read about, we have seen. And growing up right outside New York City, I mean, I grew up minutes out of the city. As a kid, I remember going and seeing columns of smoke over the Bronx nonstop. So it was like, I wanted that. And yeah, I could have been a fireman anywhere in New Jersey, follow my family's footsteps, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to play for the Yankees. I could see the Yankee Stadium. I'm like, I want to be a part of this. The early years, I ended up getting assigned to a firehouse that was not that it's not desirable. It's just not where I wanted to go. It was in Hell's Kitchen section of Manhattan. We lost 5 guys there. And so my early years was different in the sense when you go to a firehouse that have just lost 5 members, including the captain, there's a sense of uncomfortableness for me to walk through that door. But I remember walking through the door and having grown men with tears in their eyes thanking me for coming. They never thought someone was going to ever come again. And then also on the flip side, had grown men looking at me and being like, why is this guy here? Who are you? And then you had grown men looking right through you like you didn't exist. So my early years in the FDNY were not what I expected. But looking back now, it's like I always say good guys gravitate to great places. More or less, you'll end up where you're supposed to be as long as you do the right thing. And I ended up where I'm supposed to be. And I'm so, so grateful to have been a part of that early side of my career in that firehouse with those men, going to funerals nonstop, being together, laughing, crying, right? So it's not really, there wasn't that ball breaking per se of like what you get as a probie today when you come in, they bucket you with water, like all that. I got a little bit of that, but it was more just like, we have work to do. And this work is rebuilding this job. So that was a different aspect of being a probie or being a young firefighter early in my career.
Is there a hierarchy or a path of growth? Like you start engine always, then you move to truck, then you move to specialty teams if you're fit for that? How does that work?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. But the beautiful thing about the FDNY is that we're so big that you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do. And there's a job for everyone, right? If you're into robots, you can go to the robotic unit. There's that many avenues, right? But the basic avenue is you come out of probie school, you go to an engine, then eventually you go from the engine, you go to the truck. And then from the truck, you can either go to a rescue or squad or specialty ops, or you can take a different avenue, and that's studying. And you could study from lieutenant to captain to battalion chief, and then deputy beyond that. But that's pretty much how it goes. You spend about 5 years in the engine, then you go to the truck, and then you can kind of either ride that out. Most guys either study or take the special ops route, which is the natural progression, I guess you would say.
And how was the promotional process for you from starting in rookie school to where you're at now?
So I got promoted really late in life, well, late in my career. I don't necessarily ever remember myself saying I wanted to be a boss. I felt that leadership came within the company. And I think that's kind of how FDNY, that's the standard, where we have senior guys that they run the firehouse. At fires, we understand where they fit in. And they're kind of the eyes and the ears of the officer pretty much at everything we do. And I was okay with doing that. But I was in a firehouse with a lot of guys that were studying and really smart guys. So I kind of I shouldn't say I half-assed it because that's not what I did. Again, I'm not a good test taker. So I think that probably because I'm not a good test taker, I was intimidated by the process. So I did study and I put effort in, but I didn't put so much effort that I would be devastated if I didn't pass it, if that makes sense, because I didn't expect to pass the test. I ended up writing really well, but just the way things were in the competition of who we have on this job. I mean, we have guys that are incredibly smart. Like I said, I worked in the family business. I played music. I was a creative guy. Like, I didn't go away and take college exams. I didn't write college papers. I didn't have my master's degree. I had to get 30 credits just to get on the job, and that was hard for me to do. The process of taking that test was stressful. So again, I put myself into the moment and I did it. But getting promoted took a very long time because then COVID hit and promotions were frozen. Then when COVID eventually, I guess, went away one day, promotion started again. And then I got made. But I got made to lieutenant with over 20 years on the job. So that made the transition easy, but hard in the sense where the fires were easy. Understanding what to do is easy, but having a new way of looking at things, but putting the tools down, because in our job, we put the tools down. So that was a hard transition for me. We're having 20 plus years of being a firefighter on the back step, now having to put the tools down and to supervise. Now, when I say supervise, we're still crawling down hallways together. I'm just not the guy forcing the door. I tell you to force the door. That was really, really hard for me to do.
Do you see yourself promoting further?
I don't think so. I'm in a really, really great place right now. The company I'm working with, it's a dream company. I couldn't ask for more. And as a firefighter, it was a company I looked at from afar, thinking if I ever get promoted, I would love to work there, with no intentions of ever getting promoted. And I did get promoted, and I got assigned there. You just don't get assigned a position; you get assigned a division, and you kind of have to sell your self-worth to every company. It's almost like you're a free agent trying to convince the guys, like, "Hey, I'm the guy for you," But it comes natural when it's the right fit. It comes natural. And to me, I feel like that company to me is the absolute right fit. So I think I'm done. I think I'm happy there. They had a captain there for many, many years. And he always said that the firehouse ruined his career because he was so happy there that he stopped studying. And I kind of feel myself falling into that same path.
Well, there's something to be said about being happy. When did you start instructing?
I don't know the exact year, maybe 2018, I think. I was great in the firehouse. Things were going good. I had no desire to go anywhere else. I was just kind of hanging out, going to fires, being one of the senior guys. We had a good group of young, when I say senior guys, we were just kind of like the guys running the show. We had a really, really good thing going to some fires, a lot of laughs. I had no interest of going anywhere, but one of the guys went down there because we had a former member who was the captain at the time of the probie school. He's like, you should come down and give it a shot. Every guy needs a gig, right? And at this point, like I said, I had no intentions of being promoted. So they're saying everyone needs a gig, meaning like you need place to kind of hang your hat beyond the firehouse in case anything was ever to happen. You get hurt, need a little bit of extra overtime, you want to work per diem, one of these things, but like everyone needs a gig. And he convinced me. And I said, you know what? I'll give it a shot. And you have to commit to 3 classes when you go. So I went for the interview, got through the interview process, got put on a team down there. So we're team instructors. There's 6 teams. And the team became, to this day, are some of my best friends from the job. And most of us knew each other already, but we grew into a little company. And these teams become like your firehouse or your company. So that was 2018. I ended up doing the 3 classes. Then COVID hit. Post-COVID, they had nobody for the next class, and they were kind of struggling to get guys. So I said, all right, I'll do one more. And that was a year in between my last class and there. But for something that I didn't really think I'd ever have interest in, like I was always a student of the job. Like there's no question about that. I was always studying this job, and we're always drilling and training in the firehouse. But I'm not sure I wanted to leave the opportunity to not go to a fire, because I feel like every fire you miss is a fire that you lost an opportunity to learn something at. So I wasn't ready to lose those opportunities just yet. But looking back, man, it was the greatest thing I ever chose to do in my career. And I think if you ask most people that pulled the trigger and went down there for a couple classes, I would say almost all of them would say it's probably the best thing they ever did in their career.
Are there certain things that are your wheelhouse when you're teaching?
Yeah, so I teach, well, the Team 6, we were the mask team, but pretty much firefighter survival. It's a mass confidence course. But beyond that, we talk a lot about breathing, cadence, tempo, all these things that, like, if you follow my stuff, it's like kind of falls in line with what we were doing with the probies at the time. And we also did we were the team that did mask appreciation, which is kind of like the day of you find out if this job's for you or not. And we bring them to a building and we push the limits of survival within the sense of the parameters of the fire academy. I mean, we're not really pushing limits of survival, but to probies, they don't know the difference. They think this is like, we're going to die. In reality, they're very safe in the moment, but that's the day where people resign. And I don't like to see people resign, but I do like to have a part in the next generation knowing that they can hang, meaning that we can trust them at a fire, that they can do the right thing, and they can crawl down a hallway when they put them out to the field. It ultimately falls on, I feel, Team 6 at that evolution. If they can get through that, then they're fit for duty.
Does FDNY have a certain, because I think I have it in my head that there's like an attrition or a dropout or failout rate of around 10% per class. Is that pretty accurate? If you tie in resignations and...
Yeah, it used to be more. It's funny, the older you get, and now I have kids, it's like, I'd be like, oh, you're out of here, you fail, sign, this isn't for you, right? And that's kind of like the mentality that was kind of like driven into these kids. But now I look at it differently, where I know it's the greatest job in the world, right? So this is what we have to understand, is that these kids legitimately 2 weeks prior could have been working at Best Buy or Applebee's, or they could have been a carpenter. Like, now they're New York City firemen. And they're put into a situation of survival in their minds, like, I'm going to die here, which, again, reality, it's not, but they're put into a moment of like, oh shit, like, this is real. This job is real. And when they're going to resign, I'd like to pull them aside and say, listen to me for 1 second. Your parents proud of you. Your wife proud of you, right? Your kids proud of you. Everyone's telling, oh, my daddy's a New York City fireman. And you're going to go home and tell them that you just resigned. I go, I'm telling you right now, you can do this evolution. And I'm telling you right now, it is the best job in the world. And you'll remember this conversation from me. Maybe not who I am, but you'll remember this conversation 20 years from now if you just listen to me. Let's go do it again. And most times they get through it. And I think that it's important that we understand that the word coward gets thrown around far too often in the fire service. I think the coward is the guy that's not willing to take the opportunity just to slow down for a moment and take the kid with them on their hip and say, follow me. Because if you've never been somewhere, how do you know if you're a coward or not? If someone doesn't show you, you can do it.
Yeah, fair enough. And if they, beyond that conversation with you, if they then still choose not to continue, at least they had that opportunity, that moment.
Yeah, exactly. And we had that conversation where you look them in the eye and you say, you can do this. Sometimes that's all it takes. I mean, think about the first fire you ever been to, right? You crawl down that hallway, you put the fire out, and you're thinking, wow, I just did that. But if someone didn't take you to show you how to do that, you would have never done it. So it's the same thing in the fire academy. But again, these guys were not through the fire academy yet. It's only a couple weeks in and they have to make that decision if it's for them or not. I just think that maybe we have to take them to the point of return.
Yeah, and there are a lot of guys that get farther on in their career that forget where they came from and realize that they were in a place where they weren't always kicking down doors and full of confidence.
Yeah, I think humility is so important in the fire service, and I'm not sure you can teach humility, but it comes to those moments where it just takes someone to show you maybe you can do it, or maybe that you were a little off on something, and then reflect on it. That's the challenge, is being able to reflect on it and then move forward.
How did Top Floor Tactics come to be in all its iterations?
I guess it was probably around 2017, 2018. Again, I wasn't never in the slump in my career. I've always loved my job. Like, it was always my dream, and it still is my dream. And I love the job more than ever now, probably because of Top Floor Tactics and where that has brought me in my career. But around 2017, 2018, I was kind of not in the slump so much, but I was just like, kind of like, what's next? Like, I'm working in a great place. This is like my dream firehouse. Like, this is a great spot. All great guys, going to a lot of fires. I'm like, but there was something I was missing. I'm not sure what that was. And that's ultimately maybe why I turned to the training. Like I said, I didn't want to leave the firehouse, but I was looking for a little bit more. I'll never forget, I was standing in my garage and doing something on my phone, and then YouTube, you know, YouTube, you can set where like the next video just pops up. So I was watching an old Rescue 3 video from Brothers in Battle, or I forget what video, but I was just buffing out for a moment, you know, watching this thing. I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. It clicked on to the next one, and it was National Fire Radio popped up, and I didn't know Jeremy. I didn't know anything about National Fire Radio. I'm like, what is this? So I'm kind of watching this. I'm like, this is insane. Like, this is a show about firefighting. I'm like, all right. So I watched it, and actually it was pretty cool, but I was kind of giggling at it a little bit. And I was like, this is cool. So then, like, I went on Instagram and just like searched like firefighting, and I didn't know anything about that. And a couple things popped up. I was like, all right. So then I started to realize, like, there's a subculture of the society of the fire service that I never even knew existed. Maybe because we're so caught up in the FDNY world, where like we are so big that that's our life. Like, we have every sports team within the FDNY, every kind of event you can imagine, every trip. So you get engulfed, or you just get overwhelmed with what the FDNY is, that you really don't understand that there is a subculture out there sometimes. So I kind of like dove into that, and realizing that a lot of it's training, but a lot of it wasn't. It was kind of just guys talking, which I really liked. I enjoyed that. But I had a notebook that I kept since I was a probie. So when you're a probie in the New York City Fire Department, you have to keep a notebook. And on that notebook, you write down what you learned every day. I always tell the probies, write down all your mistakes, and then go back and reflect those mistakes, because you can't forget the mistakes you made, right? Because if you make them twice, then you're going down the wrong path. So just write down your mistakes, write down what you learned, write down the fires you went to, write down the fires, the people who were at those fires with you, write all down the details of the early stages of your career, and don't stop after year one. So I continue to do that throughout my career. I still do it. I write in my probie notebook. It's on my phone now through my notes, but I had stacks and stacks of the marble notebooks of just entries. Either it's one or two messages, one or two sentences, a thought, a quote, or maybe I write a page about something that happened at a fire, but I kept it all those years. So realizing there was this subculture out there, I said, you know what? Let me put a couple of these passages that I've written over the years, and then make an Instagram account and just put it out there and see what happens. So I wrote like 6 or 7 posts. I came up with this alias account because the social media policy, I mean, that is an issue, and it's been tweaked since then, but I didn't want to have any association with it. I actually went as far as blocked anyone I knew from my firehouse, from guys from the higher ups of the job. I didn't want no one to see this. So I put it out, and it grew rather quickly, mainly because there wasn't too many other training platforms out there. But through that, I've met so many great friends that pushed it forward. So that's kind of how it got started, was just like falling upon this subculture, or realizing that there's more to this job than the FDNY. As much as I love it, there's more to it. And that's how we got to where we are today. And that's just probably just putting all these notes together, and then collaborating with people, and then moving on forward to where I am.
Because you definitely cover more than just tactics and training. Like, you definitely enjoy talking about the nuances, the concepts, the perspectives. That seems to be the depth of the job for you seems to be really important. So maybe talk to me about your writing process and how much you're invested in enjoying in that writing and that creative aspect.
Yeah, so I did start with the tactics because I guess when you start to realize interacting with certain people that the fire service, not that it's in trouble, because I think it's very good right now. People are so quick to say the fire service is failing, we're in trouble, the standards are lowered. Yes, everything we do in life, there's pros and cons, and I think that a lot of the cons of the fire service today can be corrected if we educate from day one about the legacy, the traditions, the honor of this job, and we've lost that. And I think a lot of it comes from civilians and politicians kind of putting their nose where it shouldn't be, possibly, to what goes on behind the big red door. And I think we have to get back to that. And I think that's what's so important. And kind of like the twist I'm taking with Top Floor Tactics is that I don't want to lose what I fell in love with this job. And I think it's important that these kids, when I say kids, just talking about young firefighters, understand the job is bigger than you. And it's the best job in the world if you take care of it. But you have to nourish this job. You have to respect this job. And when you do that, this job will take care of you and your family tenfold for generations to come. But that's kind of the angle that I've taken with the Top Floor Tactics. I obviously talk a lot about tactics still. My lectures when I travel are tactics based, but I do a whole section on overhaul. Now, I'm not telling you how to pull the ceiling. I'm telling you the importance of why we do it from the tradition side, from the pride side. And I think that's very important as well. And I just don't think there's enough people talking about the traditions and honor of the job.
Yeah, if you could teach people passion, you wouldn't have to teach them anything else.
Exactly.
That's a quote from a buddy. I'm not going to take credit for that one. I steal it all the time.
I like it. Yeah.
Or what's that rule? You can steal it. You got to give credit 3 times, and after that, it's yours. Did you have any pushback when I know you tried to keep it anonymous, but I mean, people are eventually going to find out it's you. How's that journey been with being one of the guys that speaks up and talks about the job?
So it's funny you say this. It's definitely been a journey with that. And it's so incredibly hard to put yourself out there, especially in the fire service with type A individuals, especially in my job with the biggest type A personalities of the job. It's just, it's been tough. So I had the alias account and people were following it to the point where I'd be in the firehouse working places. And if I did a TDL or something, and I'd hear the music that I posted, like in the story that morning, and they're watching it, having no clue that I'm the guy who did it sitting right next to him. And that started to really happen quite a bit. But then, like, when you start to interact with people, I think there's value. My information only becomes valuable if I put my name to it. When you get to a certain point, like, there's a lot of stuff out there that's telling you about doing the right thing, or tactically based terminology or tactically based concepts. But if you don't put your name to it, how valuable is it really? It's not vetted. So I said, you know what? I'm secure enough of who I am as a firefighter that I have to put my name to this, because now I can truly, truly interact with people and have that conversation, and we can learn both ways. I'm learning as well as others are learning. So putting my name on it was very hard. So once I did, it kind of took off from there even more so. But the journey to get to where I am and putting yourself out there, I wouldn't say it's been a tough one until kind of recently, where the podcast started. So people now, not everyone follows Instagram, and everyone has Instagram, but now people listen to podcasts all the time, all different age groups, when they're working on the treadmill, when they're going for a run, when they're walking the dog, when they're driving, commuting. Podcasts are the thing now. So when that podcast started, which was only a few months ago, my whole job's watching it now, and it's been hard. I'll be honest with you. It's been good. I've gotten 90% positive feedback from everyone I've spoken to. A few here and there ball breaking, and that comes with the territory. If you're going to put yourself in the bullseye, you have to be able to take the daggers, and I know that. But people that are throwing the daggers, which really there's no one I can think of, but I know there's probably some hate out there, like anything else. I just wish they would understand that it comes out of good for the job. And if you cross-reference from my first post to my most recent post, I never crossed any job once. And that's, I think, the value in Top Floor Tactics is that it's 100% based around the New York City Fire Department, but you would never know that because I never say it is. You just have to know the job to understand it is. You know what I mean? So that's been a success level where I'm never saying, oh, this is what the FDNY does. It's all about just writings. And if you can fill in the gaps, you can figure out where I am and where I'm coming from. But it's not necessarily using it to promote it, if that makes sense. And I think that's been success level where I don't get too beat up because I never really said I was anyone that I wasn't. I think that if you're authentic and you're honest and you admit humility, what is there to truly hate about moving the job forward?
Or just being a voice at the table too. Who did the theme music? Because it's legit. Like, as a music fan, most people would try and do a song related to the fire service in some way, and it would come across as kind of cheesy, but it's good, man. Like, who did that?
This guy King Anu, he was a fireman in the Bronx with me, and when the vaccine mandate came, he left the job. He retired. He was always a rapper, kid from the Bronx. He grew up in the concourse. Like, he's the real deal. But he always had this rap thing going. And me being a musician, like, we would always be talking music, playing beats back and forth. We had a drum set in the firehouse. We used to have a band in the firehouse, right? So we always had the drums, and I'd be playing beats, and he'd be kind of rapping over it here and there just for fun. But like, when this all came about and I was going to do this podcast, like you said, like, I'm a music fan, so I wanted to do it right. So I reached out to him. I said, hey, can you give me something that's like really like about the job? Because I know you know the job. You were a fireman for, I think it was 7-8 years. And he threw me a couple samples back and forth, and it just kind of happened. And I love it. But thank you for bringing that up. King Anu, that's his name. And he left the job, not disgruntled, but he left the job under really bad circumstances, and that was the whole vaccine mandate. So I'm glad he's found his niche with the music. It's doing very, very well for him. But yeah, so that's where the music came from.
Nice. Yeah, shout out to him for sure. Just touch back on the drumming just quickly, because I had a thought while we were talking about it and then it escaped me. But have you seen the movie Whiplash? You mentioned jazz drumming too.
Yeah, great movie.
Yeah. Just want to throw that out there and see if you'd seen it and put it in people's minds to check that out, because it's sort of a sleeper, right? It's not well known, but it's a masterpiece.
That's why I love jazz drumming. If you watch that, there's an element of drumming that's so creative, and that movie really brings it out. And
very technical.
Yes.
It's loose and it's improvisational, but it's incredibly structured and technical.
Yeah. It's like, that's the thing with drumming. Like, you have like the metal drumming, right? And like, it's pretty straightforward, right? But with jazz, if you listen to the details, the devil's in the details in everything we do. So it's like, if you listen to jazz, there's so many little details that you don't even realize until you separate the drum from the rest of the music a lot of times. And that's why when they do in jazz, that's why everyone has a little solo within a song, because it's a moment within the moment. And that moment is so important. It's an intimate moment for the drummer and the listener if you take the time to actually find it.
Yeah, I think about drummers like Phil Selway of Radiohead and Danny Carey of Tool. If you really focus in on them playing, it's mind-blowing, the skill that takes. So how was it then bringing in guests for the podcast? Because were you doing initially on your own, you were solo, and then you were bringing in guests to talk to? So how did that progress?
Sitting in the studio where I am now, like, I would talk to this camera and it was so unnatural. Like, if you listen to the early episodes, I was like, my God, I can't even go back and listen to it. Like, this is so bad. It's like so awkward. And I really struggled, and I said, I can't do it. Jeremy Donch from National Fire Radio, obviously where the podcast platform is, he kept saying, just give it a shot. Just give it a shot. Just hit record. Just hit record. And he's trying to tell me, like, yes, like with my writings, I'm like meticulous. Now with this, he's like, you can't be meticulous, but you just have to hit record and talk. So I tried it, and I told him, this is not for me. We're shutting it down. I'm done. And something clicked where I just maybe realized, like, I just have to just get past the fact that it's never going to be perfect. Once I got past that, it kind of became natural. And then sitting with him and talking, because we're friends outside of this whole world of social media or podcasting, we're very dear friends. So when we would just talk, it's very easy. And then we recorded it and we put it out. And I was like, you know what? That makes sense because we're having a conversation. So slowly as that kind of progressed, I did that a few times with him. And then I started, okay, let me reach out to some guests. And then I started getting some guests. It's pretty amazing, some of the guests I have lined up in the future. And I'm thinking, like, this is crazy how it kind of took off. But sometimes all it takes is an email. Send an email, and next thing you know, you're lined up with the guy, and you're like, wow, okay, this is happening. So now that's a whole new side of being nervous, of having to interview someone that you know you're getting one shot to do it.
When you write, do you edit as you write in real time, or are you a brainstorm and then edit it back kind of person?
Brainstorm, edit it back. So a lot of my writings, like, pretty much every one of my posts that you see, it's more than one line. It's probably been in the works for 2 3 weeks, maybe even 6, 8 months, up to maybe years later, I go back and look at these notes and I'll scroll through and just find something from 2018 that I jotted down and then take that and work on it. So I have like thousands and thousands and thousands of notes where I reflect back on, and these notes are just rough drafts where I'm driving or running. A lot of times while I'm running, I'll just speak into my phone and then go back and revisit that and then work on it. So probably about 2, 3 weeks to get an actual post out. Like the one I did today, that was probably about 2 weeks worth of writing. And it's very short, but like I'll write it, then I'll rewrite it, and then I'll rewrite it. So when it's all said and done, it's not even close to the original.
That's interesting to hear other people's creative process, and I'm listening to a number of comedians even talk about that, about how many crap jokes they write. Like they just keep purging everything down, and then they'll put it away for a while and eventually come back to it, and then they'll tie it all together. Or even Seinfeld, I heard talk about how some of the greatest moments in their show came to him in the middle of the night before they're going to film, and they just winged it the next day, and that's where the brilliance came from. So yeah, being able to adapt and flex and just let the creative process sort of play out in your mind, whatever the timeline is, I think that's super important.
Doing it now for a few years and writing consistently, like I write every day, that like my creative time used to be at night. Go for happy hour, maybe sit there at the bar, write a little bit, go home, relax, and then work on it some more, and then revisit it the next night. Now it's totally different. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is just write before I do anything else. Every day I'll write, every single day. And whether it's be 1 or 2 sentences, or if I write a whole post that day, whatever that motivation may be for something, maybe a hot topic or something that happened or a recent fire I had. But the morning time for me has become super creative, which is cool because it's like you feel like I've already accomplished something before I even sometimes get out of bed.
Have you lost moments and thoughts along the way? Like they sort of pass through your fingers like fog and you wish you had the opportunity to write them down and they're gone?
Yeah, so many where even in my notes where like I would start something and then like there's so many that gets lost and I can't ever find it again. But there's so many things where a lot of times at fires too, where like something clicks. I'm like, I gotta remember this. And then like you get busy and you have a busy tour and you're running around and then you kind of forget like, oh, I wanted to reflect on that and it's gone. That moment's gone. But then like, that's the beauty of where I work. It's like, we're always going in and out the door many times a day. And so a lot of times something else spark up right away and boom, okay, this is a new topic I'm into.
In one of your podcasts, you spoke about the importance of kindness. And I found that one was super powerful. And I think there's more to tease out of that. And as I was listening to it, I thought about sayings like, don't mistake my kindness for weakness. I've heard before that people can make entire careers being nice guys, as in they're basically just kept around because they're nice guys, but they're not necessarily great firefighters. And I really, myself, try and promote that sort of balanced approach of, I've termed it the connected warrior or the tough plus love, like that you can be both, right? You don't have to choose stoic hardness, toughness, or curled up in the fetal position weakness, and you can balance these out, and that's where the sweet spot is, right? That's where the razor's edge is. So I think it's important for people to hear it and frame differently, different perspectives, and I really liked yours, and obviously I would steer people to listen to that episode, but maybe you can speak to it a bit more here.
Everything we do is about the people, right? But there's a level of kindness not only in the firehouse, but when you go out that door, I think that we dismiss it, because especially if you work in a place where you have a high run volume, right? A high call volume. And sometimes the people aren't the very nicest people in the neighborhood you're responding to. But if you just simply kill them with kindness, right? And the power of the kindness is so important because, again, how many times we hear it, right? So it's like, it's your worst day and they call you. I mean, that's pretty common quote or whatever it is through the fire service, but it is how you react when you get there, even if it's for a water leak. If you just take the time and talk to these people, sometimes they're just calling you because they're lonely. And if you can get past that, yeah, like this is a nuisance run, but this woman's just lonely. And we've been here 3 times this week for the same thing, but she's very lonely. Like think about just the kindness of what it takes just to, or the importance of the kindness to sit down and just talk with her for 3-4 minutes, right? I think that's professional firefighting. Professional firefighting is crawling down hallways, right? It's being aggressive, breaking windows, forcing doors, cutting roofs, all the things we talk about. But to me, professional firefighting is taking the moment and simply being kind. Now flip it back to the firehouse, right? Where, yes, in the firehouse, we know that we're breaking balls. That's part of the job. That's the best part, is the ball breaking, right? And again, if the guys aren't breaking your balls, then they don't like you. And that's something we have to remember. But there's a line, and I'm not saying like we shouldn't break balls, but like there's a line of just being a kind person. And that translates through training, translates through asking someone how they're doing, asking about the kids. That's just being a kind person. So, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question or if it kind of hits on what you were going for, but really just being kind. When you put that uniform on, especially if you're just kind to people, it speaks volumes of your character, and it also represents the fire department you work for, the name on the back of your coat, and then the fire service in general in such a positive aspect. And that's what makes the fire service so special, is kindness.
Yeah, what's that line between it being a lion's den where you're never safe versus it feeling like a family and you know the intent is love and care and respect at its core?
It's funny, I talked to a buddy this morning, we were just talking about senior guys, and he was talking about one senior guy. He's like, oh man, when we saw his car outside the firehouse, you knew it was going to be a miserable tour. And there's something to that. And I remember working with guys like that where it's like you turn the corner and you see the car outside from the firehouse and you sit outside and be like, oh man, I don't want to go in there, right? But that said, there is a level of fear that I think is important, where every good firehouse has a level of fear from the men within it. So when you walk through that door, you should have a little bit of fear in your stomach when you walk into that kitchen, hang your keys up, and be like, okay, it's free game. Game's on now. But there's a importance of that fear that sets the hierarchy of the senior men all the way down to the probie and that middle management. It's important to understand where you fit in that hierarchy, where it's, if you are middle management, remember your middle management. You're not necessarily the senior guy, and that doesn't give you the right to do certain things that the senior guy can do. But having that fear level kind of keeps that in order.
Speaking of that little level of fear and that respect, sort of dives more into the mental aspect of the job. How has it been for you mentally and even maybe physically? Like, what are the struggles that you've encountered along the way and how have you managed them?
Physically, the job is demanding, and I think that staying in shape is very important. We always have to maintain a level of fitness to perform our duty. But the side of the job of being mental, or understanding what we're doing with this whole beautiful thing we call the fire service, is very important. And I think that gets lost a lot of times too in the training early on, but it's not necessarily something you can teach. I think it's developed over time, is that having a mindful lookout of what this job truly is. And I think that when you accept the fact that you have no control of the situation at hand, you now gain complete control of that situation. So that's very a mindful way of looking at things. So that's how I've kind of navigated what it's like to be on the fire floor and the floor above. And I find it very comforting in those moments, because you've accepted the fact that you have no control. You have to get into your position. You have to do your job, but you have no control of the elements. And the elements only last a certain amount of time on any fire ground, but it's how you navigate the time balance transfer in that. I really believe that time is a tool. And if you can navigate time or manipulate time for your benefit, you're always going to win. And that's the mental side of the job, where yes, it's been a challenge, but I think it's been a learning process of going to enough fires and putting yourself in enough situations where if you can balance time, you can balance your mind. You can balance your mind, it automatically transforms over to your skill. And that's where we have to be. Again, that's the level of optimum peak performance from the fire ground that I think we all have to strive for. But that comes from one, being in shape so you can do your job, but two, accepting humility, and then three, putting it all together and then being able to perform under stress. And I think that's the mindful side of the job we have to focus on.
How's it been for you lecturing on conferences and sort of diving into, you talk about putting yourself out there, right? So the writing would be putting yourself out there, and then the podcast and lecturing's, that's a real time, face-to-face putting yourself out there. So how's that been for you?
It's funny, I got voted most easily embarrassed and most shy in my senior yearbook. And I tell people that at a lecture afterwards, maybe, and they're just like, are you kidding me? But like, it's been like an outer body experience for me, which sounds crazy. Like, I'm not a real big spiritual guy. Like, I guess we all struggle with our faith a little bit. I wouldn't say it's like the calling of Christ that told me to do this. Like, he's with me, picking me up. I'm not saying that's it. When I say outer body experience, I mean, like, I look down upon myself in that moment sometimes. I'm like, I cannot believe that I'm doing this. And I don't know what got me there. I really don't. But even like teaching at the academy in front of the probies, I was so nervous originally. And I'm thinking, and the guys I'm teaching with, like, they're just probies. They have no clue. You could tell them everything wrong. They're not going to know. So it's just getting that fear. Like public speaking is it's the most stressful thing you can do. But I practiced many, many hours in a room talking to nobody. I would just speak my lecture out loud, and I would get the timing, and I would nail that timing down, and I would be confident when I went and did these things. You have to be a critic of yourself, though, and that's important, where you have to strive for perfection and know you're not going to get it every time, but you have to strive for that perfection, because really, people are there to see you. They're spending money to come hear you speak, and if you don't put the time in it to give them what they want or what they're expecting, then you're just wasting everyone's time. So I think that if you're looking to get into lecturing, which it's very, very difficult to do good, and you have to practice, and you have to be confident with yourself, and you have to accept the fact that you are going to make mistakes, and those mistakes are only going to make you better. But it's been a long road. And again, I look back to where I am in such a short amount of time as far as lecturing. I can't believe that I'm doing it, but I have a pretty booked schedule for the past 3 years. I was traveling constantly, speaking constantly, because not that I wanted to like put myself out there, but I wanted to get good at this. And the only way you get good at it is doing it. So I would speak anywhere, any part of the country. I would show up, I would do my thing. I would go back to the hotel, I would critique what I did, and then move on to the next one. But the process of getting there was difficult. And it's probably, I would say, the thing that I look back of who I am as an individual, I am most proud of. The fact that I went from the shyest kid in high school to speaking in front of thousands of people without even blinking an eye. And that, to me, that's remarkable. I don't know how I did it, to be honest with you.
Do you think there's a lot of power as well in removing yourself out of the experience and maybe wholly focusing on the importance of the content and the fact that it needs to be relayed in a valuable way? So if you can focus on that as the calling and the prime focus, that it almost in a way fools you and takes your mind off of you, and you just become the medium for whatever the content is.
Never thought of it that way. There's a lot to that. I like that a lot. Another thing is you have to be confident in the material. Like you said, you're just the medium for the material. Well, it's all my material. So it's very easy to be confident in it. And I think we get lost when people start teaching about things that's not theirs, and where they have to put on this like persona, this is mine or this is my idea. None of it's my ideas. It's all mistakes that I've made that I've corrected over the years. Then I collaborated them into my mind and then put them into a PowerPoint and say, I made this mistake. This is what I would do now. This is how I learned it. And that's pretty much my program, is about a series of mistakes that I've made throughout my career, tactically, culturally, not always doing the right thing because you never taught the right thing. Again, going back to how I started on this job, was like there was no hierarchy of the firehouse. It was destroyed. There was nobody there. They just lost hundreds of firefighters. So there was no real core values instilled in me very, very early in my career. I always tried to do the right thing, but like it took a lot of learning and making mistakes to figure out what the right thing was, because not necessarily everybody was telling you what the right thing was because they just buried their friend 2 days ago. So it's like important to just trust the process of your career. And then when you're ready to go lecture or ready to teach, you better have a series of mistakes that you've made that you can fall back on to know that, you know what, I own this moment.
Are you having conversations now with your dad and your uncle at this point in your career, that you're deep in it, you're reflecting on your own experiences, and you can talk to them on a different level about the job?
So my dad's been sick for the past couple of years. And because of that, I think that we've really connected on this whole new world of being an officer, right? He's really proud and excited, but he's kind of watching it from afar, and like he's focused his whole getting his mind off him probably being sick was focusing on my job. And like when I'm at work, he's listening to the radio now, like stuff like that, where we do reflect on the fire. So, I heard you last night on the radio. What was going on? We talk about not necessarily the nitty gritty moments. And it's funny you say that, because I was just thinking about it this morning, how we talk almost matter of fact about like the basics, but we haven't really dove into like, not a case study, but like a fire. We used to talk fire. And we haven't really done that since he got sick, I'll be honest. And I miss it. So thanks for reminding me. I'm going to make it a point to spend some time and bring up tactics because he probably wants to talk them. I just feel with him being sick that like it almost like he really misses the job that much more when we start talking about fires.
How many kids do you have? Just the one?
I have two kids. I have a daughter and a son. My daughter's 11 and my son's 9.
Nice. Any interest in their world of like, how do you then expose them to the fire service? Are you protecting them from it? How are you approaching that?
Buddy, Jeremy and I just talked about this yesterday in a podcast about how like now that I'm getting a little bit older, my friends are having their kids come on the job and they're like, oh, we got him in this company. We got to get him to that company, all these busy companies. And I'm thinking, you know what? My son comes on the job. He's going to the slowest place there is. Just like protecting him, like you would do, like protect any child from any danger. But in reality, obviously, if my son did come on the job, I'd want him to go to the best firehouse in the city. But he doesn't seem interested, to be honest. And neither of them really seem have the interest. That may change over time. Like I've tried to really get my son to dive in it with me, and he hangs out with me when it comes to the firehouse type stuff. But it's not the relationship I have with my dad per se with the firehouse. But we have a lot of other passions together. We fish every day together. He's on my hip always, but like it's not the fire department. And sometimes I wish it was, but sometimes it's nice to have him do his own thing. It's kind of cool to see what he loves and kind of dive in it with him.
Where are things going for you next with the job, with the podcast? Are you just enjoying where it's at right now? Do you have an inkling of what the next creative process is?
The job's great. I'm so honored and just taken back and humbled that I have the opportunity to work in the company I'm working in. To me, it's the best firehouse in the world. And again, every firehouse should be the best firehouse when it's your firehouse. But I truly feel like this is like a cut above. The guys I'm working with are tremendous. So work is great. I can't express how happy I am about work and how grateful I am to be in this place. But as far as creativity and podcasting and speaking, I have a busy fall coming up. Kind of took the summer off. I have one event coming up in August, but other than that, it's like I'm going to hit the ground running in September and kind of see where it goes. I wanted to get out of speaking so much and traveling so much to spend more time with my kids. That's why the podcast was kind of birthed, where I said, you know what, I can reach more people from my own home than I really could traveling every weekend like I have been doing for the past few years. But like everything else, it's like it comes with a price. And moving forward, I don't know if I have anything planned other than what I'm doing. Kind of just keep my head down, my eye on the prize.
What are the main courses that you offer when you do lecture?
Fire Academy to the Fire Floor, Why the Disconnect. So that's like that's my core class. That's my passion. It has all my mistakes from my early days all the way up until where I am today. It jumps in a lot of basic tactics that we're teaching in the Fire Academy, and then we're realizing, well, not everyone gets to go back to a good place, right? So in the Fire Academy, you always say, you know what, learn it this way for the test, but then when you get back to your firehouse, they'll show you how they do it. And that's not always a good way because not everyone gets to go back to that firehouse that has great guys that want to train and learn and drill and teach you the right way. And guys get lost. It's a dead-end street for a lot of motivated young firefighters that realize, wait a minute, no one here wants to train, no one wants to learn, and then you become comfortable, then you become stuck, and then your career's kind of in a dead end. So that class, it connects the dots for young firefighters trying to find their way, but it also talks about for the senior firefighters in the room to like become that guy, to get motivated again, and like put a little more pep in your step and get these kids up to where they have to be tactically, spiritually, culturally, understanding the traditions of the job. Like, again, we're losing that. And that class really draws that and puts that all together. I do lithium-ion battery fires, understanding a modern fire in a tactical sense. Now, this class has been developed over a few years now where I was working on it. Guys are telling me, you got to get this out there. These fires are coming. This is before we are to where we are with them. This is years ago. I was thinking about this, taking notes. And I kept saying, like, I want to get this class going, but I can't commit to putting a class out until I've been to enough of these fires to learn really what's going on. So after a couple of years of going to, like, I feel like hundreds of these fires at this point, that pretty much every fire we go to is a lithium-ion battery somehow involved, even though they're thermally loaded or if it started the fire. Either way, there's a lithium-ion battery somewhat involved into the operation, and we have to take account for that. I kind of collaborated with a bunch of other firefighters and officers, and we paired some notes together, and we've developed a program where I think it's very good because it's tactical based, something that no one's talking about. When I say nobody, it's like we're so quick to talk about legislation of lithium-ion batteries and passing laws to teach everyone how to charge their batteries properly. That's all great. But it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change how these batteries are affecting how we operate as firefighters. So this class is a tactically based class on how we should be operating as firefighters at these fires. And when I say how we should be operating, we're not necessarily changing our tactics. We're just looking at things a little bit more detailed and how these fires will change the details moving forward for us in the fireground. And then I also put together a class called Truck Company Intellect. I did the webinar on fire engineering. As a webinar, it kind of came out as like, I can make this into a class because people are really looking for truck positioning classes. People buy a new apparatus, a new truck, and they want me to come in and talk about truck culture. And I tell them, well, you really can't teach culture. That's something that's passed on from tradition, from senior men. You can't teach it. However, I can come in and teach you truck mindset, very, very different. And that's the X's and O's of firefighting, right? So if you watch a basketball game, right, the X's and O's, defense, offense. And the next question usually comes with that is like, well, how are you going to teach us about truck positioning when you have 6 guys on a truck and we have 3? Now it gets into like, well, this is what I can teach you about is firefighter IQ, is that if you understand the game of basketball, right, it's 5-on-5. So growing up, I think we all probably played a pickup game of basketball at least one time in our life. Everyone in this world, one time in our life, played at least pickup game of basketball. And I probably would bet that it wasn't 5-on-5 full court. It was probably 2-on-2, 1-on-1, 3-on-3, but we all understood, or we were learning the process of firefighter IQ, basketball IQ, sports IQ. It's all the same. We have to understand the IQ of the game and then be able to pivot in the moment to fill in the gaps. Just like we do when we're playing 2-on-2 basketball, you pivot from forward to guard to center, but there's only 2 guys doing it. So my class, Truck Intellect, kind of pieces that all together from staffing from 2 people to 6 and kind of bridging that gap.
Is there anything else you want to offer before we wrap up?
No, I'm just really happy to sit down and talk with you, man. I really appreciate it. So, but that's it, man. Like, as far as the classes, like, anyone can reach out to me anytime on social media, and whenever you have an idea or you want to talk about something, I'll talk to you about that. It doesn't have to be a class or a lecture. I come to you, but something on your mind, something that your department's talking about, just shoot me an email or a message on Instagram and we'll talk.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate, again, you being so patient with the scheduling of all this and how life gets in the way, but it's nice to finally be face to face and take time to talk. I'm glad we're connected.
Like I said, I've been a huge fan of your podcast for years now, so it's truly an honor to sit here with you. Thank you.